Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Wilder Lincolnshire podcast from the Lincolnshire Wildlife Trust. Melvyn Pryor and Matthew Capper. Hi, Matthew.
Hi, Melvyn.
We're at the Lincolnshire show, bit of a buzz in the background. Good weather for it today, so fingers crossed that lasts for the 2 days of the event. But we're not talking about daytime, we're talking about nighttime in the podcast, aren't we?
Yes, this one is all about the Trust's nighttime endeavours and what we get up to after the sun goes down.
Yeah, very privileged because I was out earlier in the week and actually having a look at the Trust at night, including bats, natterjack toads and moths. Very, very busy at night.
Yeah, and we get up to so much during the day and we go out there and we talk to people, but our wardens, they never seem to stop.
No.
And I think they're always really modest as well. They kind of, oh, it's nothing, whatever. But if you go to somewhere like Saltfleetby where you went this week, they're out this time of year surveying and making sure that, certain protected species are getting the help that they need. And sometimes they're out until all night almost. They can be looking at moths at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and they never really seem to stop at all, our wardens. It's amazing.
Yes, certainly when I arrived, it was dusk. It was absolutely gorgeous. The light was fantastic. But I noticed that the toads became more vocal as the night went on.
Yeah, and it builds and builds into this steady chorus. And you were really lucky, I think, on Monday, because we'd had a bit of a cold spell. It had been fairly wet and damp, and then after all of that we had one nice, clear, warm, still evening, and it just I think hopefully people will hear in this particular episode just how special it can be at night time when you're out in this sort of special coast that we have here.
Well, it was lovely to catch up with some volunteers and also wardens Ruth Taylor and Matt Blissett. So Matt, just set the scene for us. Where actually are we?
We're at the Saltfleetby work base, situated on the coast, just north of Mablethorpe, and this is a work base that the Outer Humber team work out of.
Tucked away quite nicely. It was a job for me to find you, but I have got here. Ruth, you're the assistant warden. How long have you been here?
Been here about 6 years now, firstly as a trainee and now as an assistant warden.
What was it like when you first arrived? Did you know the area at all?
I knew some of the area because as a child from Lincolnshire, I used to holiday at Sutton-on-Sea and Mablethorpe a little bit further along the coast, but this particular area was new to me.
Coming up to 10 o'clock at night, I should mention, and we're heading towards the longest day, but actually we've got a reasonable amount of light at the moment, but we're here for a very special reason, one of them being bats. So why are bats so special in this area?
Well, bats are a very good indicator of how healthy a habitat is. They're the top of the food chain, and if you have plenty of bats, it means that you have plenty of other creatures that are further down the food chain, such as your insects and your moths. So if we can work out what the health of the bat population is along this National Nature Reserve, we can hopefully then indicate that the habitats are doing really, really well.
OK, so we've got to watch out we don't get bitten by lots of insects tonight as well.
Yeah, it's all food prey for the bats. Pipistrelles can eat about 3,000 small midges, on an evening. All good food supply for the bats.
Are there many different varieties of bat?
There are 18 species of bats in the UK, 17 of which have been proven to be breeding in the UK, and we have 11 of those species in Lincolnshire.
And which are the ones that we're most likely to see in the dusk then, if you're in Lincolnshire?
Probably pipistrelles. Soprano and common pipistrelles are the ones people are most likely to see, both out in this sort of environment and also in their towns, because they will roost in buildings.
And what sort of surveys are you doing to try and locate the bats? Because recently there's been quite some exciting news, hasn't there, about bats?
There has. We decided last year that we'd go and start surveying some of our woodlands on the Wold's Edge, and we just went to go and see which species we had there. And I was out one evening with our chief executive and his daughter, and she detected a very rare bat called a barbastelle bat, which we hadn't realised were this far north into the county. We knew they were in the south of the county, but they're mostly found in the south of the country, so not even this far north normally.
A barbastelle bat?
A barbastelle bat, yes.
Ooh, OK. That's exciting news, isn't it?
It's fabulous, yeah, and it just shows you what's going on out there at night, when we're all tucked up in bed. Well, some of us aren't, we're out surveying for some of these species, and it's really great to discover these things.
And do you do that? Are you out into the wee small hours then doing surveys?
If it's not bats, it's natterjack toads, which come out at night, or we're doing moth trapping and that sort of thing. So not out every night, but often at least one night a week we're often out and about till the early hours of the morning.
And we're quite lucky. I didn't know whether we would hear them tonight. We've heard natterjack toads already this evening, haven't we?
We have. They're an incredible success story here in Lincolnshire. They've been on the brink of extinction for a very long time, and over the past 5 or 6 years they've had an incredible boom in population, and you can now come out and you're probably quite unlucky to not hear them. So if you come out and about in Lincolnshire along this stretch, you're very likely to hear them singing during the summer now.
And had we got to quite seriously low numbers then?
We have, and a bat has just flown past us as well. It's all happening now.
Oh, lovely.
They were very seriously low. At its lowest point, we had 2 known breeding females on the site.
2?
2, yes, and that was in the sort of the 70s and the 80s when the conservation effort for natterjack toads really upped its game across the country, not just in Lincolnshire. And on the back of that, a lot of survey effort was put in to work out how many individual toads we had on the site, and 2 females were identified.
What about now? What do we think we've got?
It's quite hard to estimate, but to give you an example, about 5 years ago we were averaging 25 strings of spawn over the past decade each year. Last year we had 520 strings of spawn.
Wow.
It's quite an incredible increase.
You've got lots then, haven't you?
We have got lots, and the books tell us, which, we know that the wildlife reads the books. The books tell us that only 40 to 60% of females will breed in any one year, so potentially we've got an awful lot more than that.
And what is it about the habitat then? They obviously like what you're doing here now.
Yeah, they like dry, sort of arid, sandy substrates in which they can burrow. So a nice sort of short sward. So during the 1950s, when there was myxomatosis, the rabbits weren't grazing the grass as much. So the grasses got longer, and that sort of habitat didn't favour the natterjacks here on the dunes. So a lot of the management is managing the breeding pools. They're like ephemeral pools that will dry up so that it doesn't favour the aquatic inverts that will predate on the tadpoles. So it's managing those breeding pools, and through the grazing and scrub clearance, keeping a nice short sward so that they can forage for insects in the wee hours of the evening and early morning.
Let's catch up with a couple of the volunteers that we've got here as well. We've got Emma and Jill. Emma, how long have you been a volunteer?
So I've been here since October of 2023. I started at Donanook helping with the grey seal colony over the pupping season.
Wow. And do you get involved with the nighttime volunteering as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Every chance we can get. It's just such an amazing experience.
You still get excited because, as soon as we had a bat, there's a bat, and I love it. I was watching bats at home last night, but it is that dusk, it's that special time, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think you can ever get bored with wildlife. You could see something a million times and it's never going to get boring. It's just absolutely excellent to know that you're living in it as well.
Jill, what do you enjoy about the nighttime wildlife?
It's pretty special, actually. We were getting very excited just while you were talking before, because we could see 2 young foxes down the end sitting there watching us. And then just as we came here, we had the bats have just started coming out. So, you're pretty spoilt with all the wonderful wildlife that you get around here.
Oh, no, yeah. And I missed the foxes. There
were 2 just on the track there. Yeah, just came out. Just as we were talking.
There have been 2 young ones.
2 young ones?
2 young ones were just sitting there watching us. They were watching for a while, and then we all started laughing, and they got a bit spooked, so they might come back again.
Oh, my goodness.
So, yeah, and we've been... we were out natterjack toad surveying one night, and barn owl flew past at head height, and moth trapping's been absolutely amazing as well. So when you put all that together, it's been pretty special.
I would imagine it is, because it's a different atmosphere, isn't it? I've never been out looking at nature as it's getting dark. So this is going to be a very special experience. What sort of things are you doing when you're surveying the natterjack toads then? What sort of things are you catching them? What are you doing?
No, we take a very hands-off approach. I will record things such as the weather conditions and the temperature and the water temperature, and then we just stand and we wait for the toads to emerge from their burrows. The males will sing to attract a mate. They're Europe's loudest amphibian, so it's quite an amazing cacophony when they all get going. We just stand, watch, wait, and then at a time I decide, we then start counting the number of toads that we can see around each of the breeding pools.
So it's when you see them, not when you hear them.
Yes, so I will record whether we can hear them either making little social calls that they make like little grunting noises, and when the males actually start singing.
Would you like
as
to
well.
do the grunting noise for me?
No, not really.
Okay, fair enough. But they start off, they're actually underground then, are they? They're sort of buried in their little houses, are they?
Yes, they are. They can dig burrows themselves. If they're in really loose sand, they go in backwards with their back legs, but if they're in quite firm sand, they will dig a burrow with their front legs. They will also use rabbit burrows, and they will use them during the daytime and also for hibernation purposes as well over the winter.
Okay, different calls then. So they're testing the sound initially, then they appear. Do they get louder and they're trying to find a mate, or what are they doing?
They get very, very loud. There was one occasion last year Matt and I couldn't speak to each other even though we were standing next to each other because they were so loud we couldn't hear each other. So we had to text each other, which seems a bit ridiculous.
and are they only making a noise at this time of the year, the mating season?
Yes, so they have quite a prolonged mating season compared to common frog and common toad, who tend to get everything over and done with in February and March. The natterjacks don't tend to emerge until later into March, and then they can continue breeding through to August and September. But then they go into hibernation over the winter, and we don't hear anything again until the March.
Because you often hear about the places where they set up like toad crossings, don't you? And that's quite a relatively short spell. They go to a pond, they do the business, they come back again, don't they? But the natterjacks take a bit longer.
They do, yes. And until recently, our natterjack toads weren't crossing roads, but they have now spread 1.7 kilometres inland, which means that they have crossed a reasonably busy road, which makes me a little bit nervous. But ordinarily, they're just moving up and down the dunes.
But they're not a toad that we will see in the garden, are they? Generally, unless you happen to live here.
Generally, unless you happen to live here. Further south, to the southern end of the National Nature Reserve, somebody has reported finding them in their children's sand pit.
Really?
Yes, because they will just seek out the sand and where they can burrow to keep themselves safe during the day.
The other thing I wanted to talk about is moths. Again, you know, you've had a success story really here with moths, and I suppose the insects are helping the moth population as well, are they?
Yes, I mean, we have one particular moth here that we survey for each year called the marsh moth, and it's only found in Lincolnshire and nowhere else. First discovered in Lincolnshire in 1902, then wasn't discovered again until 1970. And we tend to get sort of 2 or 3 each year. They sort of prefer these marshy areas. Unfortunately, it became extinct in other fen areas. Never been a common moth. It was reported from sort of Hampshire up to Cumbria, but only at 16 sites. But unfortunately, it's not a particularly glamorous looking species. It's just a small brown noctuid moth, so doesn't get a lot of...
Oh, bless it.
I know.
If there's one listening, they'll be very upset.
But it only has a short flight period, typically sort of the middle of May to sort of the first week of June. So we have a limited time. There's just a fox.
Is that the fox?
Just a fox appeared
So is
again.
that like a little
and
cub?
and just run back in. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
goodness. This is amazing. This is quite. So we're sort of half light now, aren't we?
Yes.
Yeah. So you're saying about the moths again. Oh, you know, fox there. Everything's happening. Isn't it? The moths. Do they want a particular type of plant?
So that's the thing with moths. So of course they're Lepidoptera, same order as butterflies. Butterfly species, if you think, we have 59 species in this country, whereas the moths, there are 2,500.
Just in this country?
Just in this country.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah. And of those, 900 are of the macro moths, the larger moths. So typically in anybody's garden, you might get a handful of butterfly species, but if you was to moth trap on a regular basis, you may have a couple of hundred different moth species. and they all favour different food plants because they're caterpillars, obviously early life cycle, favour particular food plants. So the greater the variety, the greater the biodiversity in terms of the flora, the greater abundance of different moth species.
I've got horrible sounding insects flying around my ears now. Now this is good because it means the bats might like them, and I hope they eat them before they eat me.
Yes, it's all good bat food.
Yeah.
So
But I've just thought of something else dreadful as well. Our rare moth, might the bats eat the rare moth?
Yes, we do get it where we're sometimes moth trapping and we'll get bats coming down and taking moths before they end up in the trap, yes.
Well, that's nature. That's the way it works.
That's the way it works, yeah.
Bats above me now,
Yep.
just going up here.
Yep.
So where are the bats during the day? Are they in these trees around here, or where are they?
they could well be in the trees. We know that we do have several roosts within our work base, so the cladding around the outside, it has gaps behind it, and we have several bats that roost in there. We also have several birds that nest in there as well, so it's friendly for everything. And we also think we've just found a possible bat roost in the new accommodation units as well.
Right, where are we going to go now, and what are we going to try and see and hear?
We're just going to go for a little wander down the road, and we're going to go and stand on a bridge that crosses the Great O, and hopefully the natterjack toads will still be singing in the background, and we'll have bats foraging above the water underneath us.
So Matt, we've made our way down to the bridge. This is absolutely fabulous tonight. There's a slight mist just sort of rising up from the land, but a beautiful spot on the bridge here, isn't it?
It's wonderful tonight. It's actually clear, but still quite warm and calm. So we can obviously hear all the noises as we start to get into this sort of part of the evening.
Yeah, we've got a reasonable moon, sort of perhaps 3/4 of a moon up there at the moment. Does that make a difference to whether the wildlife comes out and about?
It can affect things when you're moth trapping. It's better if it's if there's more darkness, so it's sort of a cloudy evening. But other than the temperature dropping, it doesn't really affect things like natterjack toads and the bats and such like.
Just explain what's happening here with regards to the land. We've got actually a monitor going on. You might hear a noise. It sounds like a baby monitor, but it's not. It's recording bats, isn't it?
That's correct. We're just stood on Seaview Bridge at the moment, looking south towards Rymac. And here we're just above the Great O. We've recently taken out 600 metres of riverbank here to create a washland, which is sort of helps with flood alleviation, but it also creates fabulous habitat for waders and wildfowl in the winter months. And currently, where that water is been residing in the shallows, we've got natterjack toads that have taken up residence. So in such a short space of time, it's quite fantastic that the natterjacks have moved in.
I can remember a long, long time ago going to the Wisby Nature Park and listening to bats there with a piece of equipment that was specially made for the job. You're actually using an app that you've attached to your phone.
Yeah, so this is an echo meter that you plug into your phone, and it shows a sonogram on your phone. So it shows the frequency at which the bats are echolocating. So it's quite a good bit of kit, very different from the heterodyne bat detectors that you can still pick up. So we just picked up there a soprano pipistrelle, and you can see the marks there. There again, another soprano pipistrelle just flown through, and it actually come up and tell you, whereas with the heterodyne bat detectors you had to rely on the slaps and the clicks and the frequency of which you had it set to try and identify the bats.
And Ruth, what have you got over there? Have you got the more traditional monitor?
I have one of each. So I have an echo. I have an echo meter, and I have one of the more traditional bat detectors as well. And I've got that one set to 35 because we're looking for Dorbenton's bats, which forage over the water, and they're best detected at 35 to tune out any other bats that might be foraging at the same time.
Ah, so if you're doing a survey, you can be quite specific then, can't you?
You can. They all have a particular frequency that they are loudest at. For example, common pipistrelles are about 45 kilohertz and soprano pipistrelles are 55 and Daubenton's are 35.
Wow. I think, well, Emma, was it you that was helping with the marsh moth surveying?
Yeah, me and Jill both helped out as much as we could. Those very long nights.
Well, this is it, because Jill, I understand that if I want to really see the marsh moth flying, I've got to stay up a lot later.
Yes, Matt did tell us that we had to start from like 2 a.m. We were out there a bit before because we got to see a lot of different species counting in. But yeah, we would generally finish up about 3 o'clock. So we'd be packing up and coming home just as the skylarks were starting to sing again. But
wow.
It's a pretty magical time of the morning.
Yeah.
To be...
Matt, you were saying that they tend not to fly then till after midnight. Is that right?
Yeah, typically you might sort of see the first marsh moth about just after midnight, but typically I've sort of caught most of the males flying around about 2 in the morning. Yeah. So it's a long night.
It really is quite magical, and I would imagine your eyes get adjusted to the light the longer you stay out here.
They do. They definitely become adjusted to the lowering light levels. It's amazing what you can actually pick up without any artificial light. We do tend to use torches later on though when we're moving around, because the natterjack toads will be out and foraging in the dunes, and they blend in remarkably well. For a toad that has a bright yellow stripe on it, they will blend into anything, and obviously we don't want to be standing on them, so we will use torches when it gets really dark.
What are we talking about size-wise? Are they the size of an ordinary toad that we might get in the garden?
They are smaller than common toads, which is normally only helpful when you've got both in front of you so you can judge it. But generally, yes, they are smaller, the smaller toad that we have in the country.
And what are they eating? Things like slugs and those sorts of things?
They will basically eat anything that they can fit in their mouths. They're active hunters.
Me.
They're active hunters, so they will, rather than waiting for prey to come to them, they will go out and about and run around on the dunes, and they will pick up slugs and snails and ants and beetles and all sorts. And they have this very cool but also slightly weird ability to increase the downward force of their bite by making their eyeballs go inwards. So they can, I know it sounds really weird. So they can increase, so if they're eating something that is a little bit too big for them, they can apply extra force and force it down.
So the eyeballs go inwards and make more of a downward force to eat this...
Whatever they're eating, yeah.
Oh my goodness me.
Be quite something to see that, wouldn't it?
It would, yeah. And, for those that will be perhaps thinking, OK, we know about bats, they're not going to crash into us, are they? Because that's what they use for navigation. They will not crash into us while we're standing here, will they?
No, not at all. There's this really silly myth that bats will land in your hair, but why would a bat want to be in your hair? I've no idea. Bats have an incredible ability to see no matter how dark it is by using echolocation, which is basically their version of sonar. So by sending out a sound, they will then get it will bounce back to them, and whatever speed and whatever size that comes back at it, they'll be able to create a picture of what's around them.
Let's just come across to where our other volunteers are. Still getting the common ones over here?
Yeah, we were just before. We had some making that distinct kind of, they call it a slapping sound on the bat detector. You'll hear it. Yeah, it makes that really... So hopefully they'll come back in a few seconds or a minute or two.
Yeah, lovely. Anything on yours as well?
Yeah, I get quite a lot of feeding buzzes as well, which is a noise they make when they get really close to their prey and they actually eat it, which is really exciting.
Oh, so like on the monitor, you virtually hear the bat when it's going to eat something. They get very excited, do they?
Yes, they do. So they will send out a sort of a steady pulse, and as they get closer to something, they will send out more and more frequent pulses. So you end up with something called a feeding buzz as they're honing in on something. It sounds a little bit like a zip, so it's kind of like zip kind of noise, and you see that on the phone detector by the signals getting very, very close together, and you can also hear it as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's great how technology can help us. We can all learn so much more. I've just recently put one of the bird apps on the phone, and that helps me to identify bird sounds. But if you're into going out in the early evening and even during the night to listen to and see the bats, this is ideal, isn't it?
It is. It's wonderful. If you've got either an iPhone or a Galaxy phone... Oh, phone's going. Swans.
Swans going over there. just landing in the water.
They're so graceful, aren't they?
They are, and then they'll disappear into the fading light,
Into
won't
the
they?
mist. Yeah.
They will indeed.
Yeah, so if you're Apple phones or Android phones, you can get detectors which plug in, and they're quite incredible. Just opens up a whole other world.
That'll be on my Christmas present list, I think, this year. Very nice. Well, let's go and see if we can have more of a soundscape with the natterjack toads as well. Credit where credit's due. Jill, you've just spotted my first natterjack toad.
I'm so pleased for you. I'm really glad we were able to show one to you. Yeah, he's just crawling off into the short grass sward there.
But you have to be so careful, because if you hadn't spotted it, I certainly wouldn't have seen him.
Yeah, and it's all too easy. That's one of the things we have to take these really bright torches out when we're doing the surveying, because they'll literally run under your feet. So you have to be so careful to not step on them at all. But it's really exciting. I get so excited every time we see one.
Well, I am now as well, when you think how rare they were. Matt, you were just saying they're sometimes known as the running toad.
That's right. You can see how it's crawling through the. That's why it likes a short vegetation, because it crawls. There's sometimes we're known to sort of run like a mouse. They're very quick to cover ground over the short sward.
Now, what would be the predator of the natterjack toad? Will owls go for things like that, or will it be foxes? What would go for the natterjack toad?
A lot of it is avian predation, so things such as egrets or herons, those kind of birds, or corvids as well. So crows will also take them. Right. Badgers are also known to take amphibians, but I think generally the biggest predator on this site is the bird predation.
Yeah. You were just saying, looking at the yellow marking, the yellow stripe down the back there, but they have individual markings, don't they?
They do. So the yellow stripe and the wart pattern on a natterjack toad are as individual to each individual toad as our fingerprints are to us. So some of them have lovely long yellow stripes like this one has. Others will have a break in it. Sometimes it looks like it was wet paint and someone ran a finger through it and it smudged it. It's quite incredible. And if you had a lot of time and a lot of patience, you could build up quite an accurate picture of your individual toads within a population by recording exactly what they look like.
Which one is this one, by the way? Does this one have a name?
This one is Frida.
Well, when we had such few toads on site, that's exactly what they did. They catalogued every toad. So we have an old book with photographs in showing the wart pattern around that yellow stripe to identify each toad. But when you think we only had sort of 2 females and maybe 10 males, about eight or so individuals in total, that was possible. But now we have such a healthy population, we can't go to naming and identifying each individual toad.
Ruth, I think the toads are getting louder in the background, but it is worth mentioning they are a protected species, aren't they?
They are. They're protected under both UK and European law, so it is illegal to disturb a toad or their habitat or their resting places. So it's certainly, you can't just go out and do a survey wherever you want to, just on a whim. You need to be with somebody who's licensed. So both Matt and I have got a licence that we're covered through Amphibian and Reptile Conservation, and that licence is issued by Natural England. And the same goes for bats as well. They are also protected in that bats are protected and their roost places are protected as well, whether or not they're in habitation.
I can't believe we're standing sort of in the field at the moment and it's getting darker and darker, but it is really quite special, isn't it?
Yeah, and the I think your ears tune to the sounds a lot more, don't they? As your eyes, you're not using your eyes as much; you're using your hearing.
Yeah.
And whether the natterjacks are getting louder or whether we're getting more accustomed to that sound, as the night falls, I don't know.
Let's see if we can get a little bit closer to them. This, to me, is like one of the natural wonders, isn't it? We're standing here now. We were just saying earlier we could be abroad, listening to the insects abroad, couldn't we?
It sounds a little bit like cicadas or something, doesn't it? You know, something that you would imagine in sort of a Mediterranean country, but that being serenaded by natterjacks is quite an experience.
So what's so special about the area where we're standing at the moment? This is like a flood area, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's as I say, we took the riverbank out in order to create a natural washland. And this creates these wet, damp areas, which is ideal for breeding lapwings. We heard those earlier calling. We get breeding lapwing, avocet and oystercatcher, redshank also, shelduck. And these pools we've now discovered are favoured also by the natterjacks. So to them it's just another dune slack, ephemeral pools that they're likely to spawn in, yeah.
How often do you go out and do the surveying then?
We do it once a week, so every Thursday night we come out and do a survey.
I think it's just so special. It's unique in many ways, isn't it?
It's fabulous, yeah. It always raises a smile, and I think people are always surprised by, the loudest amphibian that we have in this country. You can hear them from about a kilometre away. Earlier we could hear them in the distance. Some of the natterjacks further up on the dunes there, and it's quite a sound, isn't it?
I think we'll leave the final word then to the natterjack toads. Wardens Ruth and Matt, and volunteers Emma and Jill, looking at the wildlife at night, and it was very special, Matthew.
Yeah, I have to say I was disappointed that I couldn't join you, but I think it's fair to say that is just one snapshot of all the stuff that goes on at night across the trust. Most of our wardens in their patches are always out at this time of year surveying one species or another. You go down the coast just to Gibraltar Point, we've got a long-standing protection scheme with the little terns and the shorebirds there, and they spend every night from dusk till dawn protecting the little terns and the other shorebirds from foxes and other things. It's a Herculean effort that these wardens and volunteers go to, and I think it's just really great that you've had a little bit of a taste of just what goes on after dark.
Yeah, and we can read more about this in the latest issue of Lapwings, can't we?
Yeah, Anna in our communications team actually went out and joined some of the staff and has written a really nice piece about the trust work at night. So that will be hitting doormats in the very near future. So if you're a member, look out for that coming to your door.
Another great reason to being a member of the Lincolnshire Wildlife Trust.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it, but I think our magazine is fantastic. It's always really good, packed with content, lots of amazing images in there. So, yeah, the magazine is something that we're really proud of.
You talk about the work of the volunteers and the wardens that are out and about. We heard in that piece there about, the surveying of things like the marsh moth. They tend not to fly till after midnight, so that's going to be a late one, isn't it?
I know, Matt will be sometimes 5-6 in the morning before he actually finishes, and that species is so rare. His dedication to making sure that it survives is really, really humbling, isn't it?
Well, thank you for listening to our look at wildlife at night, part of our Wilder Lincolnshire podcast from the Lincolnshire Wildlife Trust.